Welcome, everybody, to the Good Data Podcast. We have a great show for you today. John Diamond will be with us. John got his start in nuclear engineering and is now an entrepreneur and analyst in turbine power and data centers. And it's two very different things, but as you'll find out, they're related. He's a partner and consultant for a number of companies, including his new venture, a crypto mining facility called Ultimate Powerhouse. They're providing space, power, cooling, and connectivity for customers to collate their crypto mining rigs. So, full disclosure, my company actually did the engineering on the crypto mining facility. But unlike most of our jobs, John's company, Ultimate Powerhouse, actually did the design, which was this kind of out of this world crazy design. They basically made an air handler, like a normal building air handler, out of a room, and they stacked crypto miners like 10 feet tall. And the crazy thing is that it actually worked. It's working great right now. And it was such a pleasure to talk to John. We talked about nuclear power, crypto, AI, cybersecurity, all the kinds of things that are right up my alley. I hope you enjoy this discussion. Let's go. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, very well. Tired, but happy.
Right. Yeah. That's the way it is. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a hot day, but it's been better than it has been for a while, so that's good.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to start talking about your background a little bit, because you have an interesting, to me, background, coming from the critical sector from a nuclear engineering perspective. And then bringing that to data centers. So first off, how did you get into the nuclear power sector?
Actually, it's interesting. It came up just not long ago. This you'll really enjoy, right? I started off wanting to be an oceanographer, an ocean engineer, and went to a school that had oceanography. And then I did my first summer sea term and was so seasick that I came back and immediately changed my major to nuclear power, because I had a very influential physics teacher in high school. So that's what drove me for that.
So what was the oceanography? You just wanted to...
Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah.
I've been diving, scuba diving since I was 13 years old. So yeah.
So you like the scuba diving, but not the boat?
Yeah, the boat part was a little challenging for me.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it wasn't until a little bit after that my father explained that, I had the same problem when I went to sea. I was like, why didn't you tell me this?
And the Dramamine just didn't
I didn't take Dramamine.
Oh, yeah.
You just tried to muscle through it.
Yeah.
And,
So back to, you're going to school.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking about, you said you had a influential physics teacher.
Right.
And that brought you to
So I changed
nuclear.
majors to nuclear science at the time, and then I changed the curriculum into nuclear engineering, which kind of begat a job in the nuclear power industry, of course, right? So I worked commercial nuclear power for about 10 years, learned an awful lot about high reliability, high availability systems.
Yeah.
My wife decided to go to Penn for a master's degree, and so she came down to Pennsylvania while I was still up in New England. Doing the commute back and forth on weekends became kind of onerous. And somebody at the time was Shearson Smith Barney. They had a large 10-megawatt on-site generation plant, and they wanted somebody to help them operate there for their data center, to manage their trading floor and data center operations.
Oh, okay. So was that diesel or what was
diesel powered.
Okay.
So nothing related to nuclear power at all, but they knew I had utility experience.
Yeah.
I was looking to land somewhere closer. I was watching the nuclear industry start to erode away and saying, well, this is going to be gone before I retire, so maybe I need to segue out of it. Much to my chagrin, nuclear power is a great thing. It's a great way to go. I could talk about that for a really long time.
Well, I'm interested in it, so we can talk about that.
Okay.
Okay. I am interested in nuclear, there have been really three major
Yes.
/ minor
Yeah.
meltdown events.
Yes.
Chernobyl, 3
Yeah.
Mile Island, and Fukushima.
Correct. Yeah.
So they really sour the
Of the three, Fukushima is the worst,
Yeah.
and the reason is because nobody planned for that failure mode.
Yeah.
Right. So 3 Mile Island is actually considered a success story in the nuclear
Right,
industry,
right.
because you did the worst thing you could possibly do. You boiled the pot dry and thought the fuel was going to melt and go to the bottom, to the center of the earth. And as it turns out, there was almost no off-site release of radiation.
Yeah.
So in the nuclear industry, it's considered a success story. Chernobyl was wild. It was people out of control with their processes, no
Right.
processes, the absence of processes. What actually caused a Chernobyl event is when they finally scrammed the reactor. The design on the control rods they weren't properly designed. So at this super unstable portion, as the rods went in, and if you think about a car going down the highway at 60 miles an hour, the density in front of the car is the highest. So what happens is the same thing happened when these rods went in. The flux in front of those control rods driving in actually caused it to go supercritical and steam explosion.
Wow.
So the steam explosion, there was no containment. Those reactors were not designed with the same kind of containments that you see in Western reactors. And so it just blew rods literally out into the street, out into the yard. So there was fuel laying on the parking lot as people were trying to, escape from the
incredible.
site. So, and the one thing about rods, if you can see them and there's no water between you and them, you're pretty much a walking dead man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's even like hundreds of yards away, or
yeah,
just
hundreds of yards away. Yeah.
Wow.
So like if you line of sight, pretty much, if you can see it, it's pretty much gonna cook you. It's a slow death as well.
Yeah.
So as the stories that I read, which were pretty profound, they were circulated pretty well throughout the nuclear industry. Guys who walked out saw the blue glow, the blue glow, the shrink-offs glow.
Yeah.
They knew what happened, knew what it meant, just turned around and walked back in and just continued to try to recover as much as they could.
Wow.
Yeah, they just knew it was all over. Yeah. That was kind of a wild narrative that I read. It was very neat,
Right.
Very insightful in
Did that
terms
ever
of.
bother you that it's dangerous, or did you not feel like it was dangerous when you were
I
working?
never ever felt like it was dangerous. So I would spend a lot of time walking through the plant trying to figure out failure scenarios that would cause things to fail. And quite honestly, after working there 10 years, I could not come up with a single one that didn't require some sort of absurd scenario of, terrorists coming in and putting the
Right.
bombs directly at one place. And it just wasn't, I couldn't come up with anything functional. I'm talking from a practical standpoint.
Right.
But the Fukushima, that was like, wow, that could happen any place. If you lose all off-site and on-site power generation, it's just a matter of time. So
Right.
when you saw their first response to Fukushima, what they were doing is they were trying to spray water up to the highest level.
Right.
And the reason was because the fuel pool is up to the top. And so the fuel retains this incredible heat capacity
Yeah.
after it's stored in the fuel pool, and they have this fuel pool cooling system. Without fuel pool cooling, without power, there's no fuel pool cooling. Without fuel pool cooling, you're evaporating all the water. Without water, you're uncovering fuel bundles.
Right.
Right? So
that's not actually the fuel that's in the reactor.
that's nothing to do with the reactor.
Storage before
the
or
reactor
after?
in and of itself was fine.
Yeah.
It was the fuel pool that was creating. It's not fine. Don't get me wrong. It's
Right.
Damaged forever and probably beyond use. But it was the exposed fuel pool that
Yeah.
made it impossible for anybody to go in and do any work without some sort of shielding being in place.
Right.
Right.
Well, and I guess that's the other part of why people are afraid of nuclear is that it lasts. The half-life of uranium is a long time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I had this conversation. Actually, interestingly enough, I just had this conversation. So at the same time, I was working in a nuclear power world. I lived not too far from a coal-fired plant.
Yeah.
And every day on the way to work, I would see barge after barge after barge of fly ash coming out, being tracked down. And the same argument was brought up is like, well, the half-life. I go, what's the half-life on arsenic? What's
Right.
the half-life on chromium? What's the half-life on lead? There is no half-life.
Right.
So all this stuff, all these pollutants are still there.
Right.
The fact that we know that we have to manage, nuclear waste it's a great thing,
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of a lot of efforts and a lot of thoughts have been put into it over the decades. So
Yeah.
it's
I'm
not
sure it's gotten a lot better.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, now it's The problem has always been is not being able to ship fuel off of a commercial site, right? So spent fuel has just been collecting inside these fuel pools. And so what's happening is the fuel pools are actually becoming the choke point.
Yeah.
So at least one of the plants that I worked at ended up being shut down because they could no longer handle any capacity for storing fuel safely. So yeah.
Well, that's
yeah.
It's
And I'll be honest with you. I mean, half of my mentality for going into nuclear power at the time was, I'm going to do like some big expose on nuclear power. I grew up in the Adirondacks. I'm an environmentalist, a real environmentalist, right? I won't throw a piece of candy wrapper on the ground, right?
Right.
An apple core, no problems. A candy wrapper, absolutely not, right?
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time just trying to figure it out. And when I got done after 10 years of being in the nuclear power industry, I was more pro-nuclear power than anybody I know, because I look at it and I go, wow, once a month you're sending off a cask that's got resin that's just got all the waste associated with the plant, in one little canister.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to manage than barge after barge after barge going out every day. So,
and on a day-to-day basis, you're sending up water. You're sending up steam into the atmosphere.
Exactly. It's all just water vapor. It's not even steam. It's just water vapor. Right. So there's nothing being released from the plant. It looks ugly, right? It looks like these big ass towers are just spewing out all sorts of contaminations and radiation. It's just water vapor. It's just same thing that comes out of a data center's cooling tower.
Right.
Yeah. No different.
Well, I mean, I could talk about nuclear power all day. I mean, I'm super interested in what's going to come next. And
me too.
Because there's opportunity. Like we were stuck in this kind of age of the existing reactor technology, and now I'm interested in thorium. I think that's an avenue. Not that we have to talk about it, there's obviously fusion is a ways off. We have reactors that are starting to work on it. In fact, down the street from us is one of the largest currently operating.
Yeah, Princeton Plasma.
Yeah, the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory.
Yeah, right.
And that's got I think, tokamak type reactor.
Yeah,
so it's like a donut, a toroid.
Yes, a toroid, right, exactly,
that runs plasma around it and contains it in magnets. And then, sorry, you could explain this.
No, you're doing way better than I can. Yeah. But basically, they're trying to shrink create a magnetic field that's strong enough to instill a fusion, initiate a fusion reaction. So.
And I mean, they can do it, but it's just not producing enough electricity to make it worthwhile.
Someday, it'd be great. The current trend is to move away from nuclear power in all aspects. So that's why you're seeing wind and solar. I'm a big proponent of renewable energy. Solar, I have less hope for. Because of the square footage it takes to manage it, right? So, I mean, we used to joke, you want to replace an 800 megawatt plant, just put solar cells over Rhode Island. Just, that's...
Right. It's
it's like...
It's gotten better. And, also the storage, you're waiting for the sun and, to be able to keep the energy at a reasonable amount is actually really difficult.
Yes.
So and it's also, a lot of people I don't think know, if you're oversupplying to the grid, that's a problem too. You have to put a big copper. You have to shunt it to ground. You actually have to get rid of it. And that's why the smart grid is important. And
absolutely.
Which is fun. Gets back to data centers.
And
networks.
That's right.
Because, it's one of the things that really, everything right now in the marketplace is interconnected, and it's interconnected through networks. So, where you are in the industry is in this really interesting intersection between a lot of things. So let's get back into your data center work. You worked in the power plant, and then you transitioned to actually working in...
For a large financial and their data center and their trading floor operation. So they had about 7 or 8 megawatts of UPS battery backup, and they needed somebody to, manage the engineering aspect of it.
Right.
So it was all for commercial enterprise type environments. So I did that for about 7 years. A couple of merger acquisitions. I mean, in that time, Smith Barney went to became part of Travelers and part of Solomon Brothers, and then eventually became Citi.
Right.
All within the same set of structures. So every one of those acquisitions, I was kind of tugged along to do the evaluation of the technology facilities. So, and then I started kind of not differentiate between what's a technology facility, right? So a technology facility could be a NOC, it could be a trading floor, it could be as I would go on later on to do, I would become a designer for a grid control facility, just a glorified NOC, right? I mean, that's really all it is, something like a PJM or.
Do you mean for the utility grid?
For utility, yeah. I got a chance to go back and play with the utility world in that capacity again, from a data center capacity. It was kind of fun. It was a good fun time. So
again, that kind of intersection, because the grid to manage it, because of that, keeping the power at the exact right frequency and not over
load management and
So I mean, the funny thing about changing careers like that is that they kind of grow on each other.
Yeah.
So did you have a trajectory that you were looking at, or you just kind of?
No, I just stumble. At one point, I kind of laugh about this. At one point, I was probably one of the foremost experts in the U.S. for nuclear steam turbines. And it's not any kind of lauding. It's just, that's like, what did my daughter say? She had a great comment. She said, I want to take up court tennis. And I was like, why? She says, well, the minute I step onto the court, I'm going to be one of the top 100 ranked women in court tennis in the U.S. So I'm like going, yeah, that's kind of how it was in the nuclear steam turbine world. There's just so few of them, and I had the opportunity to be heavily involved in that aspect. So my point is, when I left nuclear power, I left that whole career behind, and I now do nothing ever with nuclear steam turbines. But as you say, as you're going around, now we're starting to look at building data centers with gas turbines.
Right.
So all of a sudden, that's all starting to come back into play, and we're out looking at different types of generators and different types of capacities for that. And I sit there and go, okay, let's start dusting off the old memory banks on this stuff.
Yeah.
So
now data centers are not just small towns worth of energy, but large megawatts of energy at any given time.
Right.
So you need power generation maybe on site.
Right.
So,
exactly.
It's funny. It kind of gives you job security, right? Maybe not.
I've never had to worry. I've never had to worry in terms of that. Yeah. There's always something happening. I mean, it's the societal changes that have happened, in my journey has been profound, right?
Yeah.
So, everybody talks about cell phones and stuff like that, but just a lot goes on where people talk about data centers using up so much power and how bad that is for society. And I counter that. I'm saying, well, if I can sit here and order everything I want online, I don't have to get in my car. I don't have to go to a mall. I haven't been to a mall in probably 6 years.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have to go to a mall. I don't have to turn on lights. I don't have to power the mall. I don't have to do any of the maintenance associated with the mall. I don't have to come back into my car and drive everything back again and then go out the next day because there's something else that I forgot. Right? So there's a tremendous amount of energy that each individual is spending just to consume something. Forget about finding information out, just to consume, whatever it is that we do, toilet paper,
Right.
It just doesn't matter. So I find that data centers have advanced our society tremendously in that ability to maybe too quickly, instantaneously get what it is that we need, right?
Right.
Or the information that we need. My books at home, my engineering books at home, stacks and stacks. I've carried them around for 4 different states, right? It's like, what am I doing with these now? I can find out everything I need to know, in just a matter of just going online and trying to find the information. It's pretty interesting.
And instantly instead of
pretty quickly,
indexable and searchable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough to do those calculations though. That's one thing that I've noticed that there's definitely, with anything, there's causes and effects. It's never a single cause and a single output. It's always, there's the litany of inputs where, okay, we didn't have computers, now we have computers.
Right.
Now, not only that, but we have to have data centers, so that's an input to the system.
Right.
But also we get more access to information, more level playing field in terms of education, so that it's democratized. But then that can be gamed.
Yeah. Well, that's clearly
So it's anything that's introduced adds complication. I think, and that's one of the things that is another interesting piece of the puzzle. That there's new pieces that are being added, like. Maybe this is a good transition to cryptocurrency. And that's another field that you've been working on, which didn't exist definitely 10 years ago.
Didn't exist in my knowledge base until last October.
Yeah.
That's how new it is for me, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so what got you into crypto?
I was working at a large data center in Philadelphia that didn't have very much traction. Almost no new tenants were coming in. And as I'm sitting there going, well, I'm kind of aging, right? Most of the people I know are retiring or going elsewhere, right? So I said, let's start networking with the next generation. What's the technology that needs to be deployed inside these data centers that's going to be the next thing coming? So I started going to meetups and business school things for big data, trying to figure out how much capacity they need, what do they need for big data, and then blockchain became another one that popped up. I said, well, let's go see what blockchain is, and that's kind of what initiated it for me. I spent about 6 meetings just trying to understand what they were even saying. Right. So, and I was patient. I had nothing else to do. I might as well at least attend and just watch. Everyone was very animated and very interesting in terms of what their aspirations were for blockchain, which kind of got me at least to the point where I could hear what people were saying. Before, people were just speaking a completely different language that I had no idea what they were saying, right?
Yeah.
Getting wallets, and I don't even know. Everything was just, it was quite daunting for an old guy like me trying to figure it out. But what I picked up from it is the ability to do transactions in a much better way. So I like to view the people I met were either anarchists or capitalists, right? People who are trying to change the way the world works, or people who are trying to profit from the way the world works, right? So I found that quite fascinating, and both avenues were coming together at blockchain. Right. So it was very interesting. And of course, that's how I met you, and we started talking about blockchain, and you increased my knowledge of blockchain significantly. So I went back to what am I good at? Our team is great at designing, building data centers, facilities that house large amounts of data processing.
Right.
So I just said, well, why don't we create a co-location environment to house cryptocurrency or blockchain, as I like to prefer to call it, blockchain validation devices, right?
Sounds a lot better than...
Sounds a lot better than crypto, right?
Yeah.
Crypto mining or...
Well, I think that's a lot of what people don't understand is that when people hear about specifically cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin,
right,
it sounds as though there's no real benefit to it.
Right.
But the benefit lies in that ability. Each time somebody is mining that Bitcoin, even though it takes an enormous amount of power,
right,
you are performing a validation check all the way back down the blockchain, and that has value.
Yes.
The question is how much value.
Yeah, as you said.
And how are there better ways, better things coming down the line,
right,
actual utility that's going to be coming out of that compute, as opposed to solving hash functions, which is kind of almost by definition useless.
Yes.
That's sort of the point of it. Is
Agreed.
That it's a difficult algorithm to solve, and you get lucky. It's almost like proof of luck.
Yes, proof of luck is a great way to say it.
You somehow made this lucky bet, and you got a few Bitcoin out
of it. Out of the millions of gyrations computations you could do, right? One hits.
We have to take a break. We'll be back in a second with John Diamond on Good Data. Today's episode is brought to you by Green Lane Design. Green Lane has been designing, engineering, and building critical facilities for over 10 years, including major enterprise customers as well as co-location facilities. GLD has designed and developed an integrated stack of design disciplines. If you would be interested in a free assessment, go to greenlanedesign.com, click on Contact, and mention the podcast. Have you, in terms of the other pieces of the crypto landscape and the blockchain landscape, is there anything that excites you about what might be happening in the future with it?
So, right. So I'm a bit both capitalist and anarchist. Yeah, I'd love to see the middleman go away. You know, who doesn't want to see that happen, except for the middleman, right? But I also wouldn't mind being a middleman either.
Right. I hear you.
If I could do it all again, I would rather be a middleman, right? But what's fascinating too is, so I talked a little bit. I got into a kind of a discussion with my son. I was going to say heated, but it wasn't really that heated. It was very intellectual, and he was kind of saying, "Well, your cryptocurrency is, it's you use so much energy, it has no value, right? It's just a thing." I said, "Well, it could have been seashells, right? It just happened to be, at the time, like 100 years ago, it just happened to be rocks that they pulled out of the ground that they put value on, right?
Yeah.
Now, it was a useful rock. It was very malleable and shiny and didn't corrode. But still, that's the gold standard, right? And then with the eradication of the gold standard, now everything is just based on our belief in the economy of a country, right? So if you have that belief right now, American dollar, what could ever possibly happen to it, right? But then you go back to the Civil War and you look at, the Confederate dollar became worth nothing after the war. The German mark became nothing twice, right? So you get these huge fluctuations that are always going to occur inside of any given any country's economy. That's going to happen to everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So if you go and you start spreading this economy out over the entire world, all of a sudden you've got a currency that trades without any problems, and it's got a lot more stability associated with that. One country falters, it's not a problem. The rest of the world continues to trade and operate off that. So that's one thing. And then the next thing is, and yeah, it is based on nothing. But again, financial transactions are based on seashells. They're based on, rocks coming out of the ground. They're based on people handing a green dollar over to somebody who's got like a multicolored euro, right? What is it? It's something. Right. So think about the energy that gets spent printing, stamping, minting, transporting, destroying currency. How much has got to be transported just in a Brinks the truck delivery systems for moving cash around to different entities.
Right.
If you think about how much energy that uses, it starts to kind of make you wonder. Again, the calculations are impossible at my level, but
well, it's also interesting that all the banks have their data centers, and that those data centers take up a lot of effort trying to validate all those everything that they're doing along the line.
Yeah.
So you're not doing that work, which takes X amount, which generally isn't computed.
Right.
We don't know how much work that takes, how much energy it takes just to make big banks work.
Every bank had its own check processing center for nothing but just check processing.
Yeah.
Right. That's now granted that's gone quite a bit. Everybody's dialed those back, but still, as you said, everybody has to still validate the economic changes. Yeah.
Or Visa.
Yeah. Visa. Yeah. Exactly.
There's still data centers all over the country that work with that.
Yeah. Yes.
That are decentralized but have points of attack. So you have to just gauge the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this going to work?
Yes. Yes.
And one of the things I'm really interested in is as a technology, it's not just Bitcoin. There's also Ethereum, which can be used to make smart contracts that are decentralized,
right?
Which is a big deal.
It's a huge
because
deal.
You create trust between partners and entities that otherwise would have to have a third party to create that trust.
Exactly.
And also, it doesn't 100% eliminate it, but it does help.
Yeah.
And also, there are other people bubbling up to the surface of creating actual usable computation out of those mining operations. So
that I'd like to learn more about.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Because you create a token for the work done,
right.
and then you can reward people for doing the work. And it could be that instead of having big data centers, you have a lot of data centers that are all kind of working through this tokenized stuff.
That's the anarchist dream, yes.
It is a little bit, but you're still making money off of it.
Yes,
so.
yes. Yeah.
So it's a little bit, it's decentralized.
Yes.
So it's funny that there's an intersection between the anarchists
yes, there
and,
is.
and the capitalists.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you know that change is happening when disparate groups come together and agree on something.
Agreed.
Well, part of it's going to come down to governments, and it sounds like I think it's a good indication when governments actually start making laws and doing what they're supposed to do and trying to regulate.
Yes.
It means that it's a maturation of the actual.
Yep. It was a dream, and now it's becoming a real business function.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
And, but it's also, I can understand being scared because some of these coins are not traceable.
Right.
Or potentially not traceable.
Right.
And you get that money laundering and again, you have your causes and your effects.
Yes.
There's always reasons that things happen and then multitude outcomes.
Right.
Being a physicist, you probably know that oh, you must know that you can distill a system down to like just particles, and at that point, it's very easy to predict what's going to happen. Except that when you get to the quantum level, it's all like you can predict in
a little bit wonky on you.
Yeah.
That whole string theory thing starts to happen, right?
You can predict things in a sense, like you have very accurate predictions of what the range of things is going to happen, but you don't actually know exactly what's going to happen.
And you end up with Planck's constant, right?
Yeah. I love that. It's stuff that I love thinking about.
I know, it is great.
Yeah. And like I one time read, there's a Planck length.
Yeah,
and it's, you can like, distort it into all the different pieces.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah,
I wanna have somebody from the Princeton lab because we have some of
that would be a fun one.
Arkani Hamed. If I could get him, that'd be amazing. But these incredible minds that are just down the street. It's like, just come here. It's okay.
Literally,
it might be a little
you can
hot.
walk here.
Yeah. It's just stuff I love thinking about.
It's cool.
Regardless, it's
But quantum computing, is that something you've thought about much?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay.
But it would be fun to explore that. I guess that's the next meetup I'm going to.
Oh, it's huge. I think it has the power, conceivably, to disrupt all of cryptography.
Right.
To possibly make the algorithms that are behind the cryptocurrency deprecated. If you had a powerful enough quantum computer, you could do those SHA 256 hashes incredibly quickly, conceivably.
Right.
So,
yeah.
The idea that quantum that computers may someday turn to the quantum realm to do computation, and if they're able to create that quantum coherence to enough qubits, they can do order of magnitude more computation. And each time they add another qubit, it raises another order of magnitude.
Wow.
That's the crazy part.
I need to start doing some research into this. Good.
But they barely. I mean, it's in its infancy.
Yeah.
Like the one truly commercial product that is being sold right now, just was shown to actually exhibit some speed in the most absolutely specific application, a speed increase over regular computing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's called D-Wave.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But anyway, it's interesting stuff. It's like it's just turning on.
So I want to go down this avenue for a while because you're just scratching the surface on my awareness now.
Yeah.
So physically, what is quantum computing? I guess it's not just you're not talking about distributed compute right now. You're talking about no. I know that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to.
You're talking about actually using quantum effects, electron spin, or something that's actually part of a particle,
right?
Where you can get particles to like cohere and blanking on some of the
what
terms
you're saying, I understand. I've done no reading on this at all.
Oh, okay.
But I have seen allusions to the topic because, as you said, everything is interconnected at the particle level.
Right.
So, what you're saying is very neat. It's almost like a physical mechanical compute.
Right.
Right.
Well,
right.
And entanglement. I think.
Entanglement.
It has to do with entanglement, and the more things that you can get within that quantum coherence, the more that you can run a quantum algorithm through it.
Yeah.
And each time you add one of those particles that are in.
I follow what you're saying.
Yeah.
Each thing is going to have its own reaction and have some, as you said, entanglement.
And so it's either 1 0 or a combination of 1 and 0, and you don't know that until the whole thing decoheres and you actually view it at the end of the thing. So you have to have it. It has to be maybe 2 degrees Kelvin.
Right.
Very, very cold.
Yeah.
And you have to make sure that there's no interference from the rest. So it's got to be in a huge black box, like the black box of Schrodinger's cat. You can't see in. You can't let anything get in.
Nothing can impact it. Right.
If you do that correctly, there's a good chance that a lot of what we have right now for security kind of falls away.
Right. Wow.
But the nice thing is that then you get quantum security, where you entangle 2 particles, and then you send them in 2 different directions. So the only possible way that you can
share information as if those two match.
Mm-hmm.
So then you up your game.
Yeah.
You're actually using the quantum world to
You're
create
taking it beyond,
encryption.
Yeah, beyond hashes. Right?
Yeah, right. And so, it becomes that next step of the war.
Yeah.
It's like it is almost like the nuclear arms versus conventional arms.
Yes.
It's that paradigm shifting, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But that's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so this has been one of the fun parts about being in the data center industry for so long, right? So I started off with mainframes that took up a room, right? I mean, they took up a huge room, and all this physical support required for that, cooling units, and another room that just was storage. There was a lot of infrastructure associated with mainframes, right? So it took up huge amounts of space. So what happened? They were running out of capacity. A new technology took place, CMOS. So 2 CMOS racks came in and replaced that one room of mainframe.
Right.
They used about the same amount of power as they went through the configuration, but they processed an order of magnitude more information in that same array, right? And that kept going. Then blade servers came in, right? And then everything just keeps going up. So what I'm seeing is this repetitive change in technology that is accommodating still what I believe is a function of Moore's law, right? Is we're still doubling the amount of information we're processing every 18 months, right? I mean, I know Moore's law is associated with chips, but this is effectively the same thing.
Yeah.
But what you're seeing on the power and cooling side, the way to process this is you're seeing like a sawtooth curve. So you would see the power for all these mainframes as they ramped up would keep going in step with the amount of processing they were doing, until you had a technology shift. So when you went down to CMOS, suddenly the power just plummeted back down again, until you continued processing more and more information until you finally hit the limit of that technology, and then you saw a shift to blade servers, and then the power once again dropped back down. Again, it would ramp back up again until you went to the next one. Now with hyper-converged technology and kind of bringing everything together is pretty fascinating in terms of what it's doing in power. And you look at the same thing for storage, spinning disks. I remember we were the first shop to have 3 terabytes east of the Mississippi. Mm-hmm. Took up 1 floor and was probably, I would imagine 40 tons of equipment. Right? And then, you pick up a flash card now.
Yeah.
It's damn near a terabyte, right?
I think you can fit, chip-wise, you can fit 3 terabytes in a square inch.
Right.
I mean, it's
exactly.
incredible.
Yeah, it is, exactly. So, I mean, what's, now the role of going to steady state, memory, all of a sudden is changing everything. So we're not spinning disks anymore. We don't have that energy component. So the amount of energy it takes to store information in storage is insignificant by comparison to what it used to be, right? And that's what I keep seeing is over and over this sawtooth curve happening that's in lockstep with our digitization of our society.
Right.
Never slowing down. Since I've been involved in the industry in the last 30 years, nothing has slowed down. Right? It's always getting faster and better and cheaper to do more information.
Talking about architectures and talking about changes, this is going to be a little bit of a roundabout segue, but one of the architectures that is taking that compute to the next level is it's not shrinking the die size of the processor, it's going to GPUs, graphical processing units, that instead of you having 8 cores, you have 200 cores or more. And that there's a huge boom in GPUs because of the crypto.
Right.
And so just in Ultimate Powerhouse, which is your company, you have probably thousands of GPUs running. 8 cards in a given chassis, and stacked floor to ceiling. And it's one of the amazing things about going into the UPH room is that you just see so many computers, so much going on. You're in a wind tunnel. It's just overwhelming.
It is.
And there's more compute in that facility, that little shop, than there is probably in 10 data centers or in a lot of places. And it happens to just be doing fairly simple hash functions, but it's still doing so many millions that or trillions,
right,
a lot of them,
terrorists, right? Yeah.
When it's not just the GPUs, it's also the ASICs, which
The
are
ASICs,
application specific
right.
integrated circuits.
Integrated
So,
circuits, yeah.
You're doing terahashes
Yeah.
with those, where you could only do kilohashes with regular architecture a few years ago.
Right.
What that means is that there's these computers sitting out that could be doing massive computation.
Yes.
Massive computation.
Yes.
You think supercomputers.
Yes.
You have a supercomputer. You're just using it for a specific function.
Yes.
So this is a long segue.
I like
to
it,
get
though.
to AI, which is another thing we wanted to talk about.
Right.
That that same architecture, that GPU architecture, is perfect for AI.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yes.
the neural nets that are really coming into vogue right now run fantastically well on these GPU cards.
Mm-hmm.
And the computers that you have, they're not designed for that, but
Right.
they could very easily be
Reconfigured.
for that.
Yes.
Probably have to change out maybe the motherboard, but definitely two of the cards in it, and you could have, something to rival a Los Alamos, or it's incredible how much power there is. And I wonder if you would mind talking about what you see. That could be a sea change. I'll say, especially if crypto goes belly up, that there's going to be a huge glut of these GPU rigs for cheap that could go to startups that would want to do that. So, not to say that it's going to go belly up, but do you have a sense of where that's going?
I have no sense at all as to where it's going in terms of the crypto world. So our business plan was potentially to be out of business in 2 years, right? Whether the SEC comes in or whomever steps in to manage that. So everything we've done has been super creative in terms of standing up this technology facility that is processing on average about 500 watts a square foot. Yeah. Which is about the size of what a Google or a Facebook data center is doing. It's pretty intense. Not that we're doing anywhere near the magnitude that they are, but just in terms of square foot power per square foot density, it's pretty profound. So what you're saying is very exciting to me, because it's like, wow, there is a afterlife, when this is over with. And I'm not saying that it is going to be over with. It's going to morph into something different, right?
Right.
I remember a long time ago when we all found what the www was. We were like, this is exciting. This is like pure freedom. This is like we can say, do, interact, anything with anyone. And then internet porn came in, right? And then online gambling, right? And then all of a sudden the restrictions started happening, and everything just started kind of collapsing. And now, in many times, it's more difficult to do things on the internet that used to be just simple, right? I mean, just simple searches now have become more and more difficult to do, because everything ends up becoming an ad or it's got some kind of commercial background before you actually used to get to serious information very quickly. Yeah. It's not so easy anymore. Right. I mean, you used to get to some profound information. And so now trying to get to that takes more effort or more knowledge or more capability on how to search properly, right? Or what avenues to search down. So that's what I suspect is going to happen with crypto. Is right now it is the Wild West of what's happening. People are doing ICOs for crowdsourcing, right? Yeah. As a function of crowdsourcing, people are again trying to raise money. Some of them are nefarious. Some of them are altruistic. I've gone to blockchain meetings where guys are trying to raise money for Africa, for villages in Africa. It's like a great way for them to be able to go and transform a society. Yeah. So there's both sides sitting there in that marketplace, right? So. Can
you talk about that? I'm really interested in the Africa component, because that's a way to do social good with technology. Right. And that there are a lot of nefarious people working in the crypto space. Right. And the ICO, the initial coin offering, is a way for them to kind of generate revenue without necessarily generating anything of substance yet. So there have been a lot of kind of bogus ICOs. And there's been a lot of money wasted on that. Yeah. But can you talk about just if you have any information about how that is working in Africa and making people's lives better?
I wish I could remember. A guy was going through and doing tours all over, but he was basically using the ICO process to help fund basically African communities gain water and agricultural needs, right? Right. So it was a was a not-for-profit type organization, but he was using the blockchain as his vehicle to get there. And it was pretty interesting watching these guys. It was also interesting watching how the capitalists in the room when he's presenting were like, "I'm busy now. I got to go." You know, it's like
Right.
So it was kind of funny watching that. But I don't have the specific details of how he was doing that and what the methodologies for that. But it was fascinating because there were at least 3 people who were trying to do social good in this. And it was a whole bevy of people just going in and giving presentations on what they're trying to do in the crypto world, right? So guys were trying to do ATMs, guys were trying to do trade platforms, you know, so you could trade between Ethers and Bitcoins and Lite and Dogecoin or all that stuff, right? So it's fascinating to kind of watch how that moved around. The actual, again, this was all occurring when I was pretending this. It was all occurring in that stage when I was still trying to understand what people were talking about, right?
Right.
But it was fascinating to watch how they were moving around in different business sectors associated with it. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I know that you have your fingers in a lot of pies, and you're an entrepreneur, so you see a lot of different opportunities in the marketplace. And I know that you're right now kind of knee deep in crypto as well as data center. But is there anything else that is exciting or sort of on the horizon?
We did start going down the road of AI, but my application of artificial intelligence is way more rudimentary and different than what the big guns are doing, right? So I like to go to the meetings and watch them talk. Again, they're talking way beyond my knowledge base, my skill sets. But the practical application for me in my world of operating technology centers has pretty much been along the lines of, if I've got a really good building engineer and I sit him in front of the building automation and I tell him to start looking at all the data coming in from that machine, what I'm going to get is a guy who's got a productivity of roughly, the best guy I'm going to get on the field is going to give me 4 hours of good time over a course of an 8-hour day. Right? So if I go and I staff with 3 of those engineers that are monitoring it 24 hours a day, I'm going to get 12 hours out of every 24 hours if I've got the best guys going and the smartest guys going. Their ability to be attentive to what's happening and to report on it and to make the analysis of what's going on, I'm only getting 12 hours out of every 24 hours, right? And I've had to come up with roughly $300,000 worth of salary to support that, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. So if you go and you take some of the basic functions, and if you can start gathering data and using the data, which you can now. I mean, Facebook is doing it. Everybody's doing it. Equinix, they're all involved in data mining and using the data to analysis. But just as a good low-level example, if you think about how many computer room air conditioning units are running to cool one data center, it might be 50. You know, it could be more than that, right? But if you have 50 air conditioning units and you do something as simple as just monitoring how much power it's drawing, right? So normally they're drawing 8 amps. If I know if it drops down to 6 amps, something's going on, right? So if I look at just that factor of just looking at the power draw of every one of those computer room air conditioning units with respect to each other, so I have 50 data points, and I've got 50 amps that I'm reading, right? Currents that I'm reading. And if one goes high, I know it's using more energy, and it's doing it for a reason. Something's going wrong.
Right.
And if it uses less energy, then something's going wrong. A belt's slipping, and the fans are not moving as quickly. It's not capturing enough air. There's a blockage, something like that. Or if it's using more amps, there's a binding up of the fan, or the compressor is working too hard. Something is going on.
Or somebody has a door open on
or somebody has a door open. If they're all ramping up at the same time, then the door. So you start to establish what is normal, right? Just on power, just on current alone, what's normal for 50 units. And if you're monitoring 5 different data centers, now you're at 250 units, right? And if you're at, 10 times that, it's an order of magnitude. Everything starts to get more information just on that type and style of computer room air conditioning. You start to figure out what's going on. And if something's going on, if it's an acute change or if it's a more chronic change or something that's more trajectoried, you start to see something going wrong, and you can actually create exception reports, right? It says, go look at this. Something is different now. Now you have to go look at that. So that's a rudimentary way of doing it for the facilities management world. Now, to kick it up a notch, if you start looking at, okay, well, that's just the power draw. Now let's look at what the return air temperature is, or what the flow is. So now if you start doing a heat balance on this air conditioner, right? So if you start looking at the flow in, the flow out, water's going through it. So how much water's going in, how much water is going out, what's the temperature going in, what's the temperature going out, and then look at the airflow, what's the airflow going in, what's the airflow going out. You're doing a constant heat balance. If you can keep doing that, you're going to come up with what's normal for that condition. And now if you start looking at what the actual load is and tying what the actual physical IT load is, now you're going to be able to juxtapose that data with your power, your heat balance, and now what the actual physical load is. And then if you look at the outside air conditioning environment, right? So you have a freezing cold day or a 100-degree day, it's going to change the computation as well.
Right.
So you start calculating all these things in, you get more and more data that you can start analyzing, and you can start establishing a more discrete norms of what's happening and more predictability.
Mm-hmm.
So my dream, although most people don't ever want to go down this road, is do maintenance on nothing. We call it run to failure, right?
Yeah.
Maintain nothing. Let the equipment tell you when things are going wrong.
Right.
Other than that, just let it, don't touch it, just let it run, let it operate. Because most times when humans touch equipment, they end up introducing some factor that causes another type of failure, right?
Yeah.
Or the same failure,
Right.
right? So that's kind of the world that I've been working in, is trying to play in that environment and bring that forward. Again, the big dogs are really good at it, and they're getting better at it with the amount of data that they're bringing in. But trying to democratize that and bring it down into smaller data centers is really kind of like my little pipeline dream that I've been working on for the last 10 years. So,
can I throw in energy efficiency into that?
yeah, well, absolutely. Energy
Yeah.
efficiency is totally what it's all about. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Because, one of the things about building automation systems is that they use very old algorithms.
Yes.
And they're not algorithms that work well with each other. So the PID is the normal algorithm for
Right.
running building automation systems.
Proportional, integrated, and derivative.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's just a bit of calculus that they run,
Yep.
and most people just run on proportional, which is the stupid.
Yeah.
It's a dumb.
Information in, information out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you put two of those PID loops together, they fight each other, and then you start stacking those up with 50 units.
Right.
You have,
You're-
thousands of different things that could loop together.
Correct.
And cause problems.
Yeah.
And
You've
so
got one unit heating, one unit cooling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and fixing that actually dumbs down the PID loops. So to have a system like an AI system or something that actually runs on a smart learning system,
Yes.
you get. Well, I think Google already sort of did this, but
Yeah.
they have an AI system that will take all that data, learn from it, and then figure out how to do it a little bit more efficiently.
Right. Right.
And that's exciting to me.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Super exciting, right? Yeah.
And
yeah.
so you get those two big benefits is
Mm-hmm.
the maintenance and also being able to actually get the efficiency that you want
Yes.
out of the units.
Yes. Yep.
I'm very bullish on that,
Myself as well.
but it takes a lot of
And there's a lot of inertia to change how the marketplace is.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
But the more that I was talking about Don Finley, who is we have both
good friends.
worked with. So he's a great guy, and he's in the sort of AI space, but the machine learning space. And I was just talking to him. I was taking a Python computer language class, and a very early lesson in that is, build this neural net, and it's just like maybe 50 lines of code to do that.
Yeah.
And it's a very simple one. It's just for matrix manipulation, so it's super simple. But it's a learning computer that you made in 50 lines.
Right.
And, as much as you need a lot of computation to be able to do some of that machine learning stuff, it's not as hard as you might think.
I hate hearing that. So I'm not a programmer by any means, and I have very little knowledge. I'm an old guy. I'm dying, right? I sit there and I go, God, I wish I had that skill set, because I know it's not hard. I can't believe it's hard, but the implementation of it is almost impossible with vendors and contractors. And I've tried to do it myself. And it seems unreasonable to me how difficult it is, right? They still keep bringing back the human component of, I'll just readjust the values. It's like, I don't want you to readjust the values.
Right.
I want the machine to adjust the values.
Right.
So it's like trying to get the right people. In my industry, it's far more physical. Like, it's made from plumbing contractors, electrical contractors, and so the BMS comes out of the mechanical contracting world, right? So trying to bring in the intelligence of what happens on the IT side of the platform has been really quite a difficult barrier to cross. It's one of the biggest problems I have. A lot of times I'm sitting there looking at the guys on the network side, the NOCs, and they're monitoring all the network transactions and all the computer processing. They have all the information I want.
Yeah.
They know how much energy the chips are using, right?
Right.
They know what the fan speeds are running at. They know how much airflow it is. They have all the information I want. Why can't I just use that information into my facilities management model, right?
I don't know.
I mean, it kills me all the time, right? I'm just like, that's what we're trying to do.
Right.
You know, we talk about data centers, and everybody's always talking about cooling, but you're not trying to cool a data center. You're trying to cool the chips.
Yeah.
That's all you're trying to do, you know?
Right.
And by the way, just to wrap this up and finish this thought process out, so nuclear power, there's all these tech specs that are all designed to keep you into a safe operating condition. And the very core, the very basis of nuclear power and all these information, all these restrictions and all the NRC rules and everything associated with it, it's all centered around one thing: cooling the fuel pellet. So it's the same model. It's like I can cool a fuel pellet, and all the restrictions and all the operating conditions and everything that you do is all about preventing the clad from becoming overstressed and thermalizing and breaking and releasing radioactive products into the water, which you then have to filter and clean up. That's what the tech specs are all about for nuclear power, cooling the chip. And that's what I think our data center industry needs to focus on, is stop focusing on cooling data centers or cooling equipment, cool the chips.
Oh, I'm 100% on board with that.
Yeah.
I mean, just a quick thing.
Yeah.
There was an Emerson study that said that every watt that you reduce on the chip level, because there's the cooling and the power supply and the UPS up above that, that actually saves, I think it was either 2.3 or 2.7 watts.
Wow, I can believe
total.
that. I can believe that. Yeah.
And so, but nobody really cares about energy efficient servers.
Right.
They care more about improving
the environment,
the data center itself, because that's easier to get your head around.
Exactly, yeah.
And they don't want to. Nobody wants to mess with the server admins.
Yeah.
It's like this weird black box that nobody wants to think about. So, you do what you do.
Yes.
So I that's one of those things that is a huge. I think is a huge opportunity, especially if you could take that chip stuff and get it into the building management system. That's a real opportunity.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think we're running out of time, but I want to just ask you if there's anything that you want to talk about your business, and if you have basically a plug.
I really don't. So we did the Ultimate Powerhouse. It's a prototype that we built to see if we could stack cryptocurrency machines into a data center. It was very low scale, very low cost to stand up. Probably an order of magnitude less, at least 12 times cheaper for us to build out the cryptocurrency site than if we built out a data center site. So traditionally, you'd be spending about, say, $6 million for a megawatt data center space to build out. Right now, we're looking at $500,000 to build out a little bit over a meg on that. So very fun from an engineering perspective. We've had a blast. And now we're just looking for the next level investor to take us so we can continue the process out there, and just keep going down that path. That's the fun part. So
yeah, I mean, I'll say I've seen it, and I actually was involved in the design, it is amazing how well it's working.
Yes,
I'm actually really surprised that it's working as well as it's working.
90-degree days and without cooling, and it's just pushing enough air through, right?
Yeah,
which is just mass flow rate, right?
Right.
It's all just. How do you cool something? Heat is mass flow times the temperature differential.
Yeah.
So if you raise the temperature or you lower the temperature differential, right? So you got a 90-degree day as opposed to a 70-degree day. All of a sudden, I've lost 20 degrees of temperature differential.
Right.
So how do I do that? I have to increase the airflow or cool with a different heavier medium. So, so it's about mass flow rate. That's what we're doing. We're jamming more air through those units, and that's why you're able to remove that much heat.
And there's a lot of air going through.
And there's a lot of air going through there.
And,
it's like walking through a hurricane.
Yeah,
right?
I think that the things that you've learned from this first scale.
Yeah.
You say it's small scale, but a meg is not nothing.
Yeah.
It is. You walk into it, and it is sort of overwhelming to see walls and walls of computers and all humming, and it's loud, and there's so much air going through it, and I think to be able to get that to the next step. Is very doable.
Yes, I agree. Oh, no, it's a scalable thing. I can do 5 megawatts. I can do 10 megawatts.
Right.
It's easy to do. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And my personal opinion is that data centers are converging a little bit
Yep.
on not being as super high reliability to be able to get the data to be, application redundant, which we could go into. But anyway.
Boy, I was just getting ready to launch on that. Thanks for stopping me. Yeah.
But what you're working on now is very similar to, I think, the data center of the future.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That, as we get into that sort of hyperscale stuff, this isn't just crypto.
Right.
That these architectures, make sense for other types of stuff.
Yeah.
So
that's why I love talking with smart guys like you, Drew.
I don't know about the smart part, but I do enjoy talking to you.
Yeah.
But I really appreciated that. That
Good.
was a great conversation.
Yeah, very good.
I enjoyed talking to you. And I hope we can maybe do this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Good enough, man.
Thanks, John.
Hey, nice job.
That's our show. I'd like to thank John Diamond for speaking with us and thank our sponsor, Green Lane Design. Remember to mention the Good Data podcast to get that free assessment. Our music is algorithmically created by JukeDeck. Check them out. Try it at jukedeck.com. JUKEDECK.com. For Good Data, I'm Drew Farnsworth. We'll talk to you next time on the podcast.